Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a pleasure for me to be in front of you today to share some insights on the national education policy. As many of you may be aware, it was tabled and then approved by the Union Cabinet on the 29th of July 2020. I'm not going to stick to the straight script of what is likely to be the plus or minus of NEP 2020, but I want to take you on an additional set of insights because that's what my value addition is going to be. If you look at the concept of Kaizen, which was made popular by the Japanese management experts, which also translates into English as continuous improvement, if you really look at life, there is nothing known as a perfect product or a perfect service. Way back in 1989, when there was a product called AutoCAD, I don't know how many of you are aware, it was launched. It was a version called version 9. And when the CEO or the global marketing head was in India to launch the product, I was also there. He made a statement which those days looked outlandish. He said that this will be the final version of the product because there is nothing more for them to invent or rewrite. And within a quarter, he lost his job because competition came out with better products, and AutoCAD was forced to come out with version 10 within a span of 1 year. What I want to communicate here is that there's nothing known as the best policy, there's nothing known as the best human being, there's nothing known as the best product or service. Everything is subject to continuous improvement. Way back in May 2020, 1 or 2 months prior to the education policy being announced, I had been called to address a set of about 100 odd principals across Tamil Nadu and Kerala. And in that talk, I had shared extensively a lot of insights on what I had, because at the time I was aware that the national education policy was being seriously discussed. I had also written several blogs and shared my insights on that, and I had gone ahead and shared several insights on what I would like to see in the education policy as and when it comes. And when this video was shared in my LinkedIn handle, it had about 60,000 plus views, including several vice chancellors and educational heads and deans who wrote back to me saying that some of these insights are far ahead of its time in terms of the prediction. It had, as I mentioned, 60,000 plus views. And even today, it keeps getting me a lot of inquiries on my insights on how to fine tune educational institutions, colleges, institutions, schools, and things like that. Before I delve deeper into this topic, I have a fundamental question to all the people who are listening and, of course, to myself. Would it be right for us to call it a national education policy, or should it be called as a national literacy policy? You may be wondering, what am I actually saying here? There is a huge difference between the two. If you really look at one of the quotes I read way back in 1950s, I wasn't born then, but it was attributed to a very famous Indian political leader. He was jokingly asked, what do you think about Indian civilization post-independence? And he apparently quipped saying that, yeah, Indian civilization, it's a good idea. And it was supposed to be a humor and laced with a lot of powerful thinking, in fact. What is the role of education, if at all? If you look at our neighboring country, Bhutan, they are the only country maybe in the world to measure the state of the nation through what is known as a happiness index. They do not measure by GDP, they do not measure by anything else, but they measure by happiness index. Finally, when we go through all that we go through in life, the schools, the colleges, the literacy that we pick up, get a job, settle well in life, and when we go through the twilight of our career and then retire into life and then look forward to the going on, what really matters to us is how well we have lived life. Have we expressed ourselves in full? Have we been really happy? Have we been peaceful? Would intelligence alone matter? When you look at some of the definitions I have read through of what literacy and what education is. Literacy is about giving the student knowledge on the chosen subjects. No further, nothing more than that. Whether it's science or maths or history or whatever subject that they pick, they get the best of insights and make them literate. But would it make them a complete human being? That is something that I would like to look at the vision statement of NEP Policy 2020. If you really look at it, the entire vision is based around the fundamental concept of making India a global knowledge superpower. While it's a very laudable, what I would say, vision to have, would that really suffice? Would it be sufficient that we make more and more of rote memory system based literacy and stuff them with a tremendous amount of theoretical knowledge, but do not really give them what is needed for them to lead life? If we have to revisit the definition of literacy, literacy is the theoretical knowledge that people get in schools, colleges, educational institutions. Whereas education is what really forms or shapes the human into a person of character, a person who you could call civil, person whom you could call civilized. If you really look at one of the books I had released in the time of pandemic, it was a book called Peaceful Parenting. It was my 10th book. My 11th book is scheduled to come out anytime now, called as the Spiritual CEO. In both these books, the concept of just sticking to monetary returns, today's education system, at least in this part of the world, to a great extent is revolving around giving them competencies which would help them in all probability to get a good job. Whether you want to blame it on Lord Macaulay or you want to blame it on what we have been following since English left quite a few decades ago. Even today, predominantly, if you look at the state of education, I am not complaining, I am giving areas for improvement. As I said in the beginning, it's about Kaizen. Even today, I address several students periodically, maybe in the last 30 odd years I have been in this field. I had spoken to at least a couple of million students in several forums and given them insights. When I really get close to them, I always found, which became the inspiration for my book Peaceful Parenting, is that they were highly stressed. I find that the syllabus is loaded heavily. What I studied maybe in my graduation or post-graduation is being taught in 7th or 8th standard today, and I am not joking. I have a daughter who is doing her CPI. I know what it really means. They become literally workaholic, where they're addicted to books. On the other end, if they don't like the stream of literacy or education they're going through, they're addicted to something else, thanks to the widespread availability of social media, internet and all that. In fact, when I met several parents, when I met several scholars, when I met several academicians, and when I met people from several other industries, because finally the entire education system is responsible for feeding the nation its future set of citizens. You are going to have a person making a movie, or a person manufacturing a phone, or a person running an IT organization, or whatever. They all finally get out of an education system. And if that education system does not prepare them to be a 360 degree, I had in this Peaceful Parenting, I had envisioned where I was speaking about India or any education system being responsible for making global citizens. Today, when Chairman was introducing, he was speaking about the famous Nalanda Institute, which is known for its ability to make people into people of absolute peach of a character. They were not just known to mug up and repeat the formulas and theorems and concepts. And I always, whenever I talk to students, one of the famous question I ask, which many of them know, is I normally tease them and start, how many of you know what is a plus b whole squared? And they all give the answer in split second. So I ask them, what are you doing now? They are 25, 30, whatever, their parents are there. They say that no, now we are working here. I said, when did you use a plus b whole squared here? They say, no, we have never used. Okay, that jokes apart, the point that I communicated in peaceful parenting is the importance of developing a wholesome human being out of an education system. The quantum leap that the NEP 2020 has made is really humongous. Hats off to the people who have thought through. They have made a tremendous amount of changes. In fact, I had about 14 slides written on the plus points of NEP 2020. But I thought, considering the kind of audience we have, they all would have already gone over this in the last few months since this policy was released, because every person who speaks in all probability will speak about the policy decision and the plus points, specifically in terms of what the policy itself holds within the policy, where it clearly demarcates the regrouping of the age instead of the current system, and the choice, like what the chairman said, combining history and music and things like that. Phenomenal amount of changes. But would the incremental changes being made in the NEP 2020 be sufficient for us to make global citizens? Amartya Sen, one of the Nobel laureates India has produced, way back 15, 20 years ago, he developed what is known as a Human Development Index along with a Pakistani scholar, which was instrumental in him getting the Nobel Prize Award. And where he speaks that a country cannot be gauged only by the economic growth of the GDP and things like that, but they need to be gauged through what is known as a Human Development Index. And he had developed a Human Development Index based on about 14 or 15 parameters, which also finds mentioned the talk that I had given way back in 2014, a series of talks called Glorious India, which again focuses on the importance of turning around people and making them as wholesome human beings. What is the point in having a rote memory system where a person is able to ace the IIT entrance exam, JIT or NEET or things like that, but they come out as emotionally weak people who are not even able to handle the pressure of family or the society or things like that? Is our current national education policy doing enough for us to look at in this line? Is something that I always still have doubts. Let me share some more insights before we. Many of the questions that might pop up in your head, I can either take it after this session is over or during the panel discussion that we have later. Fortunately or unfortunately, the current education system, not in India but throughout the globe, has made humans, or rather the students, into running a rat race. There's a famous English quote which many of you might have surely read is when you run a rat race and even you are still a rat at the end of the race. And when I meet students, the pressure is always, I'm already uncle, sir, whatever, I'm getting already 94 marks, but my parents are putting tremendous amount of pressure. They want me to score 99 because that's what will make me look as a good son or a daughter in the view of the society. And because my father is so and so in the society, my mother is so and so, they are not accepting me to score. I'm happy with this 94 because I'm good at fine arts, I'm good at writing poetry, I'm good at design, but they want me to take up this specific course and take up a job because they want me to settle and things like that. Which literally brings me to the main point. It's still a race out there. Is it worthwhile? Is it worth for people to run a race? Is the first question. Should we be continuously looking at grades and marks? And many students whom I meet in 10th and 12th specifically, they all ask me a fundamental question. Sir, please tell us how we can get a job in one of the leading IT companies. Because I want to visit US, I want to stay in US, I want to get a green card, I want to become a citizen, I want to see the world, I want to enjoy. And for that I have to score good marks, and for that I need to do well, and I have to get a job, and then only I can go. See, the entire thinking pattern has to a great extent been ingrained based on one single factor called as economic parity. Many of you might also have some exposure to corporate system. You might all know the famous concept called as a balanced scorecard, which was brought out by a famous American called uh, Kaplan, Robert Kaplan, way back in 92 or 93. It speaks that even in an organization, you cannot determine the growth of an individual purely by their economic or financial parameters or contribution. They insist that there are other parameters that you need to look while looking at the development of a human being, and human beings are not in any organization to be looked at only as a P&L entity. They are not just a P&L or a balance sheet entity. How much have you contributed to the P&L today or this week or this month, else you are out. Everything is related to your productivity and what you bring in terms of profits and earnings per share and things like that. They broke their roof literally, and they made many of the management to rethink the concept of engaging people purely based on economic parameters. And in many of the organizations, I have been implementing BSc as one of the tools in several organizations, as being part of my consulting background. And we find that that has helped several organizations allow creativity to flow in. It has allowed people to enjoy their work more, focus on more of learning, focus more on other parameters other than just contributing economically. So, coming back to the students being put through the pressure of having to win a race. Unfortunately, the moment you look at a race, you always have the concept of win and lose, first and second, and things like that. And from the very young age of 3, 4, 5, the students have been ingrained with this thinking of having to win somehow, and the next line automatically follows: win at any cost, whatever it takes. Is a famous term that I've seen many experts using even when they speak to students. I don't know what you will do, but you have to get the first mark because I have invested so much. I bought you the iPhone you wanted, I have given you a wonderful place to live, we are living in a gated community, blah blah. And the amount of pressure and stress and tension these students are put through. Some of the students' parents who come to me for coaching or counseling, they all ask, my son who is just about 12 has taken to drugs, what do I do? So I asked them, what do you think is the root cause? I don't know, sir. And then finally, when we really go deeper and deeper, they say that the age of 6 or 7 he was such a lovely boy. But after that, we put him in tuition, we started turning the heat on, and he couldn't take the pressure. And finally, they understand that to a great extent, the pressure that they have turned on has created stress and tension. And students don't know how to take it out. And the only method that they know is to go astray, whatever be it. Either they get addicted to music, or they get addicted to movies, or they get addicted to something which is other than education. Then it sort of puts a mental barrier in them, saying that this is not something that I would like to get into. Imagine, would a policy, whichever part of the world, leave alone NEP 2020, as I rightly mentioned, some of the insights that they brought in are really shifting to a great extent from theory to practical knowledge. Earlier, we were in a rote memory system, where it was all about mugging up and throwing things out at the right time in the exam. If I remembered well and I was able to throw out, I got good marks and I was called a good student. I am a rank holder and I am a gold medalist. I know what it means to study, and I would rather put it, I understand what it means to mug up. And I did it well, and after I came out of the college, I don't even remember 99% of what I studied because I got into a different line. And today the line in which I am in has absolutely no relevance. But to a great extent, the shift NEP 2020 has made is to convert part of the theoretical knowledge into practical knowledge. This is something that I find the scientific temper that is being developed with the students at a young age. But some of the questions that do come up with a global perspective, since there are some of the global leaders present here, I would like to put this question, share my insights, and maybe they can share their insights also. Are we solving a problem here, or are we just glossing over it by repackaging a policy? I don't know. Some of the global problems that many of the academicians have shared with me, these are not my insights alone. I'll share three of them, or rather, three of them roughly, I would say. The quality of education. The second bigger challenge they say is academic inflation, and third is called as underemployment. I am talking about the period which comes after you graduate and things like that. The quality of education, if you really look at one of the famous international standards called as PISA, or Program for International Student Assessment. There were 73 countries who participated in this, and it had varying degrees of measuring the students' competencies. and India stood 72 out of the 73 countries that was present. And subsequently, India apparently said that this system was loaded against them, and then they withdrew from this competition. This was prior to the NEP 2020 being released. I don't know if the government has taken a stand now to send the students back to the PISA competition. Uh, there are still time. After all, it's only about 5 or 6 months since the policy has come out. The quality of education, is it going to address the global standard where even if you work backward, looking at what PISA is addressing and look at what they're expecting and work towards that, it might help because PISA is a standard looking at just beyond the academic credentials alone. It's not about a memory competition as sometimes they run in many of the schools and organizations. The second point is thanks to the competition out, see, several of the people who get out of graduation, they don't start a business. They all go and look for a job. And what happens is, with or without the knowledge, they become degree chasers. In my father's time, even if you had cleared a PUC or pre-university certificate as it's called, you're considered a champ. And during my time, or during my brother's time, who was 10, 12 years older than me, a graduation was a must. In my time, a PG was a must, so I had to do a PG because without that, I was not considered fit enough to be called as an educated person. And now, if you really look at it, with MPhil literally being scrapped, you can go for PhD. Nowadays, whenever I meet people, I sit in several boards to help people to interview candidates. Having a single or a double PhD today has literally become the norm. And finally, if they look at what they are applying for, is such a simple job. Recently, there was a statistics which came out that some of the class 4 employment opportunities of Tamil Nadu government, we had people with MSc and MPhil applying for it. Whereas they very clearly said people above 10 standard or 12 should not apply. You couldn't stop. Thousands and thousands of them applied. Are people chasing degree and in the process getting overqualified, academic inflation as it's want to call, and actually shooting themselves in the foot by not being employable anymore? The third point, which is a global challenge not only for India, which is being faced everywhere, is there is either a mismatched employment or a underemployment everywhere. Whenever I meet any HR manager, they always say that we are not getting the right people for the job that we want. When I meet unemployed candidates or people who are not properly employed in other organizations, they all say that I am fit enough for some other job, but I have been put here because it gave me a job, it gave me an opening, and I am not able to get out. Underemployment or wrong placing is a certain issue which we do need to concern. I have a few other concerns which this August forum can also deliberate. Uh, if you really look at the policy very deeply, it is still based on, to a great extent, a syllabus based kind of an approach. It is not based on learning outcomes, specifically in the higher education streams. A learning outcome is the impact what the education would create for the human instead of looking at just covering a set of syllabus which is meant. No harm in that. Obviously, as I mentioned, NEP 2020 is a big leap compared to the some of the policies which had existed before. This surely is a big change, but it is still an incremental change. It is not a pole vault or a radical change that is really needed. If you look at some of the videos which are on Khan Academy or the Norwegian kind of system or the Singapore kind of system, we still have a lot to catch up in this part of the world. Maybe ma'am from US would have certain insights to share on that concept. The second point, which is very sorely missing in the policy, is placement and career education is not finding an explicit place. There is still scope for the government because I'm hearing that the department is still talking to people to see if they can fine tune the policy, because we are still in a virtual mode and we still have another month or so before they can touch it up and relaunch again as version 2. Placement and career education, which is one of the fundamental reasons. Let's go back to the basic reason why people go into college or schools. They go into college or schools for one of the reasons is they want to get a graduation or a PG or whatever, and then they want to get a job. The economic dependence of the Indian population with BPL quite being high, thanks to the NEET suicides and whatever which is happening. Placement and career education, for example, if you are able to predict from fifth standard, sixth standard. There are certain parts of the world where they do this, where they're able to start predicting what this person would be based on certain behavioral indicators, certain assessment tests, and things like that. And then they counsel the parents that your son or daughter, in all probability, is likely to look at these two or three streams. In fact, we at Sea Change, we ourselves had developed a tool to study students, and we had done profiling for more than 10,000 students, where we are able to gauge, even at the age of 11 or 12, at least three or four streams of education or literacy, what I want to call, that the student would be good at actually getting into. We call it as right choice your career. When we do this, it does the profiling on certain behavioral and thinking pattern of the student, which takes about half an hour for him to do online. More objective tick off kind of parameter, which is designed for students to easily handle. It gives them the choices that these are the three or four streams that you can look at moving into. Today, fortunately or unfortunately, placement and career education is still left to external bodies. Whether there is a vested interest or whether government did not want to put their nose into it, I really don't know. But there is a last mile connectivity which is missing, which is sorely to be addressed, at least in the ongoing policies, at least from the 8th or 9th standard, since they are very clear they want a job out of this education. Give them that option. Where would you want to go? How would you like to yourself get qualified? And makes it much easier for them. And one taboo subject which hasn't found place again explicitly is sex education. Unfortunately, thanks to the penetration of social media and with umpteen sites throwing information, including OTT platforms, today's students get to learn all this out of school, and they are not able to freely talk about it. And hence, what happens is there is still sort of a veil under which they have to hide before they secretly speak about this. It is quite natural for students as they grow up and then they reach the age of teens and grow through the age, whether you're a boy or a girl. There are certain things which have to be taught, and if it is taught in a scientific way, it takes the stigma out of it. Because recently there are a lot of jokes going around about some of the Zoom calls which are recorded about a teacher teaching a subject on this and how it went wrong. Some of you might have watched it in social media forwards and all that. This is something, for whatever reason, government hasn't paid open attention, which today, thanks to the proliferation of the information and knowledge which is freely available, is something the NEP future versions will have to take care. Value, skills, and entrepreneurship has not been focused much. If you really look at it, instead of creating more and more of people who are employable, we ran a program several years ago in our organization, which you even today run, called as GBT, or Going Beyond Theory. Every year we pick up students from several colleges on. We can handle only a certain amount of numbers, so we take limited amount of students. And between the time they write their final exams and the results come out, 3-4 months, whatever, we give them a practical, actual, I would say, orientation on what actual life is, what business is about, by actually handholding and connecting them to a mentor. There are a few colleges who have already implemented it with selected benefits, and they have come back and they wanted us to do it. This is something, if it gets streamlined and gets supported by the government or by the educational institutions or autonomous universities and things like that. Entrepreneurship is something that we really need, specifically with agriculture going in a big way. We need entrepreneurs who are ready to go back and be on their legs. If you really go back to the fundamental analysis of Lord Macaulay, he had been commissioned then by the House of Commons to look into the ways of breaking the dependence of the Indians, because those days there were no jobs. Everyone was on their own. They either had a field or they were an artisan or they're doing something else. And this system, which was apparently brought, was to give them education, and in the name of education to make them look for jobs. I am not saying that it has to be broken, but can we start giving them that additional input to make them look at becoming an entrepreneur also? So at the end of the graduation or whatever, they have 2-3 choices instead of just looking at 1 or 2 lines, IT or whatever, where they want to work and make money. Entrepreneurship is a difficult game, but it has rewards. At least me, Mr. Abraham, who is in the panel, we all know what it means. We counsel and coach entrepreneurs, and the reward for entrepreneurship is being an entrepreneur itself. The the sense of being free, the sense of being able to give employment to people, the sense of being able to contribute to the GDP is something which is really something which is a standout. A couple of other points I would share. I have another 5 minutes left. I'll go to the conclusion slide or input after that. Uh, the current educational policy which is coming out has beautifully changed some of the concepts of how people look at studying. It has really broken some of the shackles which were there earlier. One thing which is not coming through in this policy is NEP does not openly say anywhere is it a firm policy which must be implemented, because we are a heterogeneous educational system. It's not completely run by government. There are a set of schools and education institutions which are run by government. There are a set of educational institutions which are run by private organizations with some kind of a government support or interference. And there are private universities and autonomous universities and private institutions which run with a very thin layer of an umbrella above them. So the NEP 2020, the implementation, is it going to be uniform across all the platforms, or is it only a guideline? Which is, when I spoke to a few people connected to the government, some IAS official, they themselves said that this portion is still really not very clear to them. Let me go to the closing insights which I want to share, and then I'll wind up and close off before we take any questions either now or later. There are a set of systemic issues which need to be handled in terms not just of the education but the supporting infrastructure. For example, the support from the society, the support from the parents, the support from the teachers, and their skilling level for them to become leaders and things like that. The supporting system in terms of building the infra and all that. The national education policy to a great extent is addressed one specific area very well, but it is only in terms of the educational content to a great extent. It's not addressing some of the support infrastructure, because you cannot hope one part of the policy alone to help you to change the system, and the supporting environmental factors which are there, which are not being given complete, because you cannot say that my lung alone will get better, my heart will be weak. All organs, the 12 organs inside your body will have to work well. That the supporting system which is around this will have to work well for us to get the maximum benefit. The life skills like understanding finance, understanding insurance, understanding health, understanding protection, understanding safety, understanding the digital skills which are essential for us, because the abuse through digital platforms has become very high today. Our children are being targeted when they get into online platforms. They don't know how to defend themselves. All these in some way will have to get into part of the educational policy, or the policy is not going to be clear directly on that. Would the academic institutions have a chance of doing something through co-curriculum activities and things like that? It's something that they have to look. And coming from an industry perspective, even today the school to society connect, school to I would say industry connect, if it is established well. I remember that when I was in school and college, one or two teachers took interest on their own and made us come on a weekend and took us to a couple of small offices, small factories. They had absolutely no agenda. They just wanted us to know about what world is. They took us. I went into a factory when at the age of 13 or 14. I was shown around. It was not part of my curriculum. The teacher took some interest, because one of the ex-student of that school had a factory and he was ready to allow students to come. The school and society connect, the exchange programs that happen, all those things need to happen in a much more focused, in a much more stronger way for us to get the maximum benefit out of the NEP, and to make education as an inclusive growth. Till the last student or the last, I would say, citizen or a child does not get the proper education of a minimum of +2. We speak about literacy, we speak about 100% literacy. India still has a huge gap there. Would NEP find a way to address that is something I am still not clear, but it would be nice if that is taken care. And finally, based on value-based education and yoga and Gurukul type and meditation, the system that I follow, Heartfulness, we do a lot of work with schools and educational institutions. If we are able to make world-class citizens, to a great extent, in my view, the job of the NEP would be